What's up, you guys? Welcome to my channel. Whether you are new here or not, thank you so much for choosing me today. So today's case is definitely one that is going to raise opinions. Okay, I definitely did not know about this case before like 2 weeks ago. I was researching something totally unrelated, and then I just happened to stumble upon this case. And the case I'm going to be speaking about today is about South Africa's youngest convicted female murderer. I would definitely love to hear what you think about this case. So please don't forget to comment, share, like, and of course, subscribe. On the 14th of September 2002, Radha Govinda was killed in her home, a murder that was orchestrated and organized by her 12-year-old granddaughter. Okay, so this is definitely a super interesting case, and before we go any further, let's start at the beginning. Radha Govinda was 59 years old at the time of the murder. She is from Pietermaritzburg and lived in Northdale. Radha was described to be a millionaire businesswoman, and she owned a nightclub named Manhattan Nightclub. Now, on the 14th of September 2002 would be the day that Radha is murdered. Okay, now what in the world went wrong? How did we get here? How is it that a 12-year-old has murder on her brain? Now, because Radha's granddaughter was a minor at the time of the murder, her identity was never revealed. Now, it has happened before where a young offender would have their identity concealed, and then when they come of age, the media would, reveal their identity because they are no longer a minor. But for this particular suspect, this 12-year-old girl, her identity and name has never been revealed. Okay, there are 2 images of her on the internet, but none of those images reveal her face. So what we do know about the suspect is that she is of Indian origin, and we will get into the men involved with this murder. They gave a little description of her, and I do believe that when it came to her court case, she had to testify in front of a camera, if I am not mistaken. So the articles referred to her as the girl or the woman, you know what I mean? So because of the articles that I found where they referred to her as the girl, that is what I will refer to her as well, if not Radha's granddaughter. Now, the girl was described to be somebody who was very good in school. I mean, at 12, she was only a primary school student. And of course, when her peers and her teachers later learned of her crime, they were very shocked because she had such a nice personality, a normal girl who, had many friends around her because of her personality. And the girl lived with her grandmother. It was not really explained as to why she lived with her grandmother, because her mother is alive. So I mean, but that's not weird. In South Africa, that happens, where the child will live with the grandmother. I mean, it happened to me. A portion of my life I lived with my grandmother because my school was close to her home, and then for the weekend I would go to my parents' house. It's nothing weird, it's not uncommon in South Africa. There are missing parts to the story. Like, for instance, when I am researching a case, I like to find out, even though, it's needless to say that the girl would later be arrested or, be a person of interest for this case since she lived with her grandmother. I like to know how they made that connection, but I could not particularly find that information. Okay, so what happened was on the 14th of September 2002. Okay, now the girl had drugged her grandmother, had spiked her tea, and this obviously caused her to go into a very deep sleep. She was drugged. Okay, so while Rada was drugged in her home, in her bedroom, the girl decided to go onto the street, which would be the street where they lived in Northdale. It is Bombay Road. And she approached two random men. Okay, she approached these men and had a picture of her own parents. Okay, so she decided to tell these men that, look, my grandmother killed my parents. Will you do me a favor and kill my grandmother? And in exchange for the murder, the girl offered them, goods from the home so they could just ransack the house, go through the house and take whatever they wanted, steal whatever they wanted. And she even went as far as offering them sexual favors. And what is absolutely wild to me is the fact that we live in a day and age where a 12-year-old girl can approach men and those men will listen to that 12-year-old and take on her instruction, especially an instruction of that nature. Now, this version of the story we did get from the two men that eventually agreed to kill Rada at the instruction of the girl. I mean, you would think that two grown men would alert an adult or take that information to the police, but obviously not. They listened to the girl. They went back into the house and strangled Rada. Now, Rada didn't even see this coming because she was in a drugged state. They strangled her, and according to the two men, whose names were Vusmuzi and Sipho, okay, at the instruction of the girl, she told them to slit her throat to make sure that she is actually dead. And they proceeded to do that as well. Now, another strange thing that happened is that the girl had asked her 6-year-old brother to come into the room and see, their grandmother in that state. I don't know what the thinking would be behind that. I don't understand, but anyway, this was something that she asked her 6-year-old brother to do. Now, as I said, her identity was never revealed, right? So when Vusmuzi and Sipho had described the girl, they did say that she looked 18, but whether she looked 18, 30, 12, it's just so sad that she could so easily go onto the road, which was close by to her grandmother's house, go onto the road and just recruit two random men so easily to come in and kill someone. Now, of course, they eventually got arrested. Okay, so When they got arrested and eventually got to trial, the girl had pleaded not guilty because I don't think she actually physically killed her granny. And also, her story would sometimes change, which is so common with the suspect's version of events. So, as I said, the girl pled not guilty and blamed a family friend for the murder. Okay. Now, at this point, her family, Radha Govinda's kids, basically her aunts and uncles, were livid at the fact that their mom was killed at the hands of the 12-year-old niece. Like, can you imagine? Okay, so she had pled not guilty and further blamed a family friend by the name of Dash Govinda. According to the girl, she had testified that Dash had visited her at school on 2 occasions, convincing her to, get rid of Radha because apparently the girl's grandmother, Radha, wanted to kill the girl's mom and brother. Okay, so according to the girl, Dash came and, was negotiating and trying to plan this murder with this 12-year-old, which makes no sense. Okay, but anyway, this is what she said, and she said that Dash had come to her on 2 occasions. However, Dash completely denied this. Another reason that she explained Dash had came to her to organize this murder was because Dash owed Radha about 20,000 rand. And he did admit to that. He was like, yeah, sure, I did owe Radha money, but I would never want to kill her over it. Eventually, the court basically rejected the girl's version as a lie because there were 2 witnesses/suspects who did testify against her, being Vusmuzi and Sipho. Okay, when they did the deed and they were now in court, they completely testified against her, and their stories happened to match. So that is a very strong case against the girl. Now, another thing that the girl had denied was the fact that she had instructed the 2 men to slit Radha's throat. According to her, she had left the room, and by the time she came back, Radha's throat was already slit. She says she had not instructed them to do so, which is now hard to believe because she completely made up this lie about Dash. So it's not really looking good on her side. Now, at the time of her conviction, she was 14 years old. So this was 2 years later. Even though she was 14 years old when she was actually convicted, she was tried as a 12-year-old because that was the age at which the murder happened. Now, the judge also took into consideration the reasons presented by the girl as to why this murder had to happen, why she wanted to kill her grandmother. According to the girl, Radha had lied to the girl's father, so Radha's son being the girl's father. Apparently, Radha had lied to the girl's father and told him that who he knew to be his dad was actually not his dad. And the girl's father had committed suicide, so Radha felt very guilty telling him that information and then having him commit suicide. Now, it's unclear if that is the reason that the girl's father committed suicide, but he did happen to commit suicide knowing that information about his biological father. Another reason that the girl gave for wanting to kill her grandmother was the fact that she said that Radha would pray in front of a lamp, hoping that the girl's mother would die. According to the girl, Radha had refused for her to live with her mother. And Radha said that if she tried going to live with her mother or tried moving out, that she would scar her face. Radha also complained about the phone bill. Radha had complained about the phone bill, complaining that the girl was on the phone to the point where the bill was as high as 1,800 rand. Some reports say 2,000 rand, but the main figure was 1,800 rand. And these calls would be made to the girl's 20-year-old boyfriend. What is a 20-year-old man doing with a 12-year-old child? What do they talk about? Radha complained about the girl's mom not giving enough money to look after the child. The girl said that another reason was that Radha would talk badly and belittle her mother. Of course, we will only ever have the girl's version and reasons because unfortunately Radha is not here to defend herself or explain herself, with regards to those accusations. But I do feel like it was a thing of the girl not wanting to abide by Radha's rules. I mean, her having a 20-year-old boyfriend speaks volumes. Okay, she's not hanging around with children her age. When you are with a 20-year-old man, can you imagine the kind of conversations you will have with him, and for her to be offering sexual favors to strangers, having an older man at such a young age can contribute to that kind of behavior. I'm not saying that the boyfriend is the reason that she went as far as murder, but she will definitely be around more mature conversations, you know what I mean? And I mean, 12 is a child. That's a baby. She's a primary school student with a 20-year-old boyfriend. So I do feel like, I mean, there's not much in the articles as to her living situation. As I said, why she wasn't living with her mother particularly, because her mom is still alive. So I'm not sure, what the family situation was like between the mom, daughter, and grandmother. And even something like, where she said that Radha was complaining that her mother was not giving enough money to take care of the girl. Like something like that, for somebody who is a millionaire businesswoman, it doesn't seem like it would be too much of a complaint because Radha, had money, and this was the child of her son who passed on. So you would think that she would have no issue providing for the girl, for her granddaughter. And there's always like an abundance of love between a grandmother or a grandparent and a grandchild. So like something like that makes me question her reasoning. And of course, anybody would complain if the phone bill was 1,800 rand. What is a 12-year-old discussing over the phone to the point where the bill is so high? So yeah, we'll never know Radha's version of events or explanations. So this is all we have. Now on to the sentencing, okay? Vusi and Sipho were sentenced to 25 years in prison. As I said earlier, they both testified against the girl, so she was definitely charged as well. And the option to serve a term in prison would be the very, very last resort, due to the fact that she was a minor. And I had read something quite interesting on the internet. I couldn't even like link it because it wouldn't allow me to copy the link. Otherwise I would have linked it in my description box. But it was, you know, children's rights and protection, USA versus South Africa, right? And they had used this case as an example versus a case in America where a 12-year-old boy had murdered his grandparents. And basically the gist of that entire article was the fact that in the USA, they will focus on the nature of the crime over the age of the suspect, whereas in South Africa they will focus on the age of the suspect over the nature of the crime. Now with Christopher, the boy in the USA who was 12 years old when he murdered his grandparents, he was sentenced to like 30 years in prison, and he was officially convicted when he was 15 years old. So for 2 years he was in juvie, and then when he turned 17 he was moved to a penitentiary, like a proper adult prison. And in South Africa that was not the case for the 12-year-old girl. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison, which she would spend under house arrest. She was allowed to continue with school and participate in extramural activities. She was to attend a rehabilitation program, and when she turned 15 she was to serve 120 hours in community service per year for the rest of her sentence. And a correctional officer would visit 4 times a week at irregular hours, so at random, and that correctional officer was to submit a report each time. So in South Africa it's always coupled with, you know, rehabilitation, because a child is considered immature and lacking judgment, okay? However, in America it's not quite the same, and for each state there are different rules and regulations regarding young offenders, okay? But I feel with this case, first of all, the Supreme Court of Appeals had, you know, opposed not sentencing her at all, because they felt like that would be way too lenient. Basically, the reasoning behind the American way is if a minor is able to plan a murder or execute a murder like a grown-up, then they will be able to withstand trial like a grown-up, okay? Whereas in South Africa, as I said, they look at more of the child's development and age and consider rehab coupled with, you know, the sentencing that they would get. Now, I do agree with South Africa's way of doing things because, a child has a right to education and all of that stuff. But I do feel that the sentencing was still very lenient. Like, she did not spend time in jail. Like, if you think of those shows where they send naughty kids to prison to intimidate them, and they have the prisoners and the police officers like shouting and screaming in their face, I feel like the girl needed that type of intervention because, sure, she was a 12-year-old, but this was a very elaborate plan to get her grandmother killed, and it worked. She actually went through with it. Like, if you had to think about this plan of hers to get her grandmother killed, like, she had lots of chances to say, maybe I should not go through with this. She spiked her grandmother's tea, okay? So she had to go and find these pills, whether her boyfriend got it for her, she outsourced it, or she found the pills in the house. She knew which pills to use to drug her grandmother. She then went onto the street and waited for two men, that she was scouting out, and had made up the story about her grandmother killing her parents, which was not true. Like, all those steps, and still offering the men to take whatever they want from her grandmother's house. And if this woman was a millionaire, I mean, she was a millionaire, but can you imagine the valuables that they took from her house? Like, I would imagine her house to be fancy, right, to match her bank account, and they took her jewelry. So these men got a lot out of this murder materialistically. So I feel like she should have at least spent some time in prison so that the gravity of the situation really sinks in. And of course, like so many other suspects, she was described to show no remorse. In fact, she was upset. It was as if the sentencing was an inconvenience to her. She was upset. And when I was researching the story, I'm like, well, why are you upset? You're the one who caused this mess. You're the one who, ended another's life. Why are you upset? It's like all these conditions that are now put before her, to be under house arrest and to attend therapy and to do ABCD, was such an inconvenience to her, and she was upset about it. So she definitely had a mature way of thinking for a 12-year-old. And even the fact that she was allowed to participate in extramural activities. I mean, prisoners go to school in prison, they are able to complete their education. You know what I mean? So I feel like, yeah, sure, she got 7 years, but it was still very lenient because she could be at home with her mom. She still kind of had freedom. But that's just my opinion. In 2017, she did fall pregnant, and this was news to her aunts and uncles. So her family, with the exception of her mother, had completely like cut her off. They didn't know she was pregnant. They don't want to speak to her. When they think of this entire murder, it's such a painful thing for them, so they don't want anything to do with the girl. And as I said, her identity was never revealed, and the family actually feared for this baby that she was bringing into the world because they questioned the kind of morals that she would teach her child. But the girl did explain that, you know, she has served her time. She just wants to move on, and she doesn't want her child to have her life ruined. Well, I don't know if it's a baby girl, but she doesn't want her child's life ruined because of what she did. And that's about it. That is the case of South Africa's youngest convicted murderer. Tell me what you think about this case. Unfortunately, this case was not as in-depth as I would have liked it to be. I definitely would have liked to have known more about her family life and, you know, what happened, where it all went wrong, you know. Unfortunately, we just have her version. So let me know what you think of this case. It's definitely one that I could not let go. I mean, 12 is very young. Do you believe the reasoning that she gave for wanting to kill her grandmother? I mean, no reason is ever good enough to take away somebody's life, but let me know what you think. Do you feel that her sentence was light, or do you feel that it's fair enough, seeing as she is a child or was a child at the time? What were you doing when you were 12 years old? I definitely wasn't killing people. But anyway, that is the case of Radha Govinda. It's very tragic that, you know, somebody who was very dear to her would end up being the one behind her murder, because the girl was considered to be the apple of Radha's eye. So how ironic is it for the apple of her eye to have her killed? But anyway, guys, that is that case. I gotta get out of here. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and remember to be grateful for your life, because you're always loved and needed. With that being said, I will see you in my next video. Peace out.